Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, The Role of Order Management in Headless Commerce. Today, we will hear from Alan Jackson, our VP of Solution Engineering, and Jamie Cairns, our SVP of Channel and Alliances. Before I hand over, I just wanted to run through some housekeeping and alert you that there is a chat box function on the right-hand side of the interface. So I encourage you to use that throughout the webinar if you have any questions, and we'll try and address all of them during the Q&A section at the end. The webinar is aiming towards a 30-minute window today, so if we don't get to address all of them, we will make sure that we follow up with you afterwards directly. Just to remind you as well, we will be recording this session and making it available as on demand afterwards, and we'll email you with the details. Without further ado, I will hand over to Jamie.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So we're going to start off just with a very brief why headless commerce. So it's all about being unrestricted, assembling fantastic customer experiences. Change happens and it happens fast, and you need to be ahead of the game. You throw off the shackles of your enterprise suites, which historically have been okay at everything, but you're after excellence. The open ecosystems of components to best in class, allow you to be unrestricted in your creativity and the ability to guide and influence your customers. Customers who have a wider and growing range of ways in which they shop. They also have more shopping channels than ever before, and new ones are being added all the time. It's not just your commerce website, but also mobile apps, store kiosks, running endless aisle apps, marketplaces, social shopping. The way customers want to be supported has changed. It's not just call centers, but chatbots, text message exchanges, social channels. In short, you need the flexibility to adapt quickly, provide a variety of different experiences depending on the persona and the context of the shopping journey and throughout that life cycle. Next, Alan. So from an architectural point of view, headless commerce allows you to decouple the presentation layer, which is the environment in which you create these fantastic and engaging experiences, decoupling that from all the back-end services and the data. You get consistency and efficiency by standardizing those services at the back end, without compromising the flexibility of the front end. So this architecture is fast growing in its importance and its applicability to various different use cases. But in order to make that work, it's essential that the heads or the components on the front end, the presentation layer, can talk to multiple different systems in the back end, and being able to plug and play and taking an API first approach to integration allows you to standardize that data and unify the services at the back end as you want to add new applications and new presentation approaches in the front end. The API first approach allows you to assemble all best-in-class components, and unifying those services at the back certainly doesn't, in today's world, mean a single software product to do everything. As you can see on the bottom end, we're not going to cover everything in headless commerce today. We're going to focus on the area of order management, but some of the key pieces of data that we're going to focus in on are inventory and order data that we'll talk about slightly later in this presentation. Next slide, please. So first thing I'm going to do is try and dispel a common misconception when we're talking about order management systems, and that is that the OMS only kicks in its role after an order has been placed. Certainly, core functions like orchestrating the order sourcing logic, making modifications to orders, enabling store fulfillment, these are all critical and are absolutely functions of the order management system, but they're fairly well trodden paths, and they're really table stakes today. In a modern architecture, the OMS is far more than that. The majority of our clients and our partners are telling us that unifying inventory is their #1 challenge. And this is where the OMS starts. in order for you to be able to unleash the power of the amazing commerce and CMS applications up the front to create the personalized experiences we just talked about, inventory information is needed in real time, and we're hearing more and more of our clients are utilizing that data way before the buy button, setting expectations about how things will be fulfilled early in the shopping journey. This aids conversion, but actually there are a lot of other knock-on effects that we'll talk about. By handling all these interactions before the buy button, the data that you generate about the demand from customers, not just what they were successfully able to execute, actually gives you great insight into your forecasting processes and many other systems. So I'm going to just be upfront. We're not going to spend an awful lot of time today talking about order placement and order processing. I think that's the easy part really of order management, and not to diminish its importance too much, because we've spent a great deal of time optimizing that within our platform. But the areas that our clients put the greatest emphasis on, real-time inventory visibility. So where and how do you use that to maximize reach? Controlling how and why you might aggregate and or segment inventory for different purposes. A bit of an overview of the different types of systems that OMS sits by sitting at the heart of the architecture, shares and consumes data with and from, and some insight into availability, which is really the kind of quest to extend range and availability. Is the quest to match supply and demand perfectly so that you optimize your operations. And then a critical aspect of order management and how you might go about doing it is some areas, and Alan's got some great insight from his experience working with our clients into how to de-risk an OMS project and kind of demystify some of the complexity. So we're going to be fairly high level about each section. It's a 30-minute session today. So each of those probably requires or could justify a far greater amount of time, but we'll do deeper sessions on each one over the coming weeks and months, but we'll do a bit of a whistle-stop tour today. So Alan, I'm going to hand over to you, please, to kick us off with an introduction of how an OMS looks at inventory management, and specifically real-time inventory visibility.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jamie. So I think where we see a lot of the conversation today is, our retail clients and partners are really omni-channel selling on the front end, but they're also omni-sourcing on the back end, right? So this brings a really complex environment where you've got varying maturity in technology on both sides of the equation, that they're managed by different teams in different countries quite often. And when these two worlds collide, that there can be great complexity in getting some harmony. So really, order management, as we see it, really has a job to do to bring cohesion into this environment. And a headless model in particular is where you can get accelerated connectivity and more adaptability as more and more of these channels become available and turned online, or in some cases get turned offline, as we've seen in the last 18 months. You need the ability to be able to adapt quickly. So a headless architectural model for order management is really advantageous to help us with that kind of adaptability that's required. Now, when we think about inventory in particular, there's an aggregation, synchronization, and then presentation of that availability, as close to real time as we can get it. And as Jamie's already alluded to, the role of an order management system has really now become, inventory is now table stakes in this domain. So presenting availability, aggregating them from various sources that you see here on the right-hand side as some examples, and then presenting those effectively into various channels that you see here on the left, is now become, a critical component of the role of an order management system. And as those different classifications of inventory mutate over time, you're going to want to track reservations and corrections and returns and back orders, replenishment and pre-orders and any other classification that's important to your business. Being able to track those and manage them in an effective way enables you to control then what range and availability you're presenting online. But then the kind of downstream process for managing orders becomes much easier and as automated and streamlined as possible. And then as these two systems continue to communicate, that need to be chatty with one another during the life cycle of the order is quite important as well. So it's, you know, we're talking a lot about inventory today, but we must continue to acknowledge that the order post order placement is critical to manage effectively. And if we've done our job effectively up front with availability, then that processes for OMS downstream become that much easier. So that's kind of just a quick snapshot on the first point, and I think now we're on to the second point and around controlling what you see.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So after creating a unified source of inventory or a unified view of inventory, we can look at how you control what and where you sell, and how the OMS can help you map that to the desired customer experience, combined with the ability to fulfill and the ability to predict how you're going to fulfill things. So customer preferences adapt frequently. You have channel promotions kick in-store visual merchandisers do a great job, which affects sales velocity in store. There's a whole host of other factors which influences and affects the tension between supply and demand. You know, we moved a far way away from seasonal open to buy calculations, fixed demand forecasting, and so forth, for the ability to know where inventory is going to sit and where it's going to be bought from. The additional complexity of channels really adds multiple additional dimensions to that. So a modern retailer really needs to be able to adapt in real time to demand for products and for their promotions, and the excellent work that's done in acquisition in the top section of that presentation layer. So having a highly connected system optimizing the operations is one of the roles of the OMS, and being able to dynamically adjust how inventory is presented across channels, taking into account the customer context, and of course the business objectives and the profitability objectives that come with that, and that's often a tension. Alan, can you talk a little bit about how the OMS is used in that segmentation and controlling of inventory in its presentation?
Yeah, sure. So getting the inventory to move through the systems, as we made in the previous point, and making that as near real time as possible, is then further complemented by segmenting that and pooling and prioritizing your inventory for what makes sense for your business. Being able to look at things, it's kind of obvious examples that we tend to see across our client portfolio is based on region or brand or potentially the channel that they're selling through, is a very quick and effective way to be able to segregate, pool, and prioritize inventory for those different purposes, and that will yield massive impact and optimization to attributing the right piece of stock to the right order at a given time. And then there are further optimizations that you can make beyond that, which look at critical data points that would enable you to be able to make better decisions at a specific point in time for a specific order. So there are things that you can understand about a particular customer's basket at a point in time, about what they're buying, how much does it cost, what loyalty group do they sit in, where do they want it delivered or collected, what time of day is the order being placed, any attribution about the products that they're buying. Those are very much what we would consider to be external consumer factors. But then you may also want to wrap around that assessment, things that are specific to the nuances of your business. So store grading and a kind of categorization or classification of the fulfillment centers from which you want to source your stock, and other ways in which you measure the effectiveness or fulfillment rate or performance of those locations. Things like capacity are always ones that we tend to see as being quite critical. And then I think outside of that, then that you've got a kind of general approach, which is using data-driven optimization. So using that historical data that you have available to you, things like event-driven platforms and others that are really logging every single part of the process through inventory, digestion to availability, presentation, and then order sourcing. You've got this wealth of data available to you that you should try to leverage as much as you can to learn upon and make decisions upon in the future to really optimize how you're sourcing. So those tend to be the areas that we see being quite critical for our existing client base and partners.
Thanks, Alan. So with all of that unifying and segmentation of inventory that we discussed, one thing that you and I have failed to see yet in our travels around the retail ecosystem is a truly kind of greenfield technology landscape in any of our clients. So although lots are forward thinking and embracing headless or API first principles, there are always lots of existing systems in place, and some of those are ripe for replacement, but some of those have an enduring role to play in either the supply of data to or consuming data from the OMS in order to maintain operations. So a modern sophisticated OMS can use the data from across the organization, and there's a couple of examples that, if you don't mind, I'd like you to take us through around point of sale systems and call center systems too that are really intrinsically tied into the omni-channel promise.
Yep. So I think when we look at kind of two classic examples, as you've already pointed out, finding the optimal way to finesse the communication mechanism by which order management and that system communicates really differs from client to client, and there are many factors that kind of underpin the choices. But using point of sale as an example, being able to receive regular kind of drip fed delta feeds with respect to inventory changes that occur at that location allows an order management system to then have that, to be able to give it that tag of a near real-time view of availability is critical to be able to source effectively for the next order or the next availability call that's being made. Getting that regular feed allows us to consume, really small bite-size information that's coming into the platform, rather than the kind of more traditional batch-based reconciliation that we might have seen in previous years, where we're now seeing retailers adopt a more fast but small pieces kind of approach to integrating a point of sale to order management for that kind of inventory domain. Another example is the call center tool and call center representative persona, where it's maybe more about order. So being able to pull in the relevant order history for a given customer profile, as well as an up-to-date view of what is the status of my order, being able to drill down to that nth degree of consignment and label and tracking ID and where is it and what's going on with it is really important to the consumer. And I think if you're not providing that information up front, either through self-service e-com channels or at least to the call center staff, you're going to need to be able to deal with those real-time calls and requests on demand. And that's, again, where a headless model really plays quite nicely to that demand and that need for a retailer who wants to give that level of service to attract loyalty and retention within their customer base.
Thanks, Alan. So moving on, one of the common goals that I and others in our organization and partners hear frequently from our clients is the desire to extend range and availability across those channels. So in the complexity, matching demand to supply, making sure that customers' convenience expectations are exceeded, has often been seen as a complexity and often flying in the face of profitability, right? So the ability to do all of those things, to meet expectations, to exceed expectations, to be able to supply product wherever the customer wants it and for them to shop in the channel that is their preferred one. There's ways to optimize, and there's ways the OMS can improve and ensure that the business objectives are also met and profitability objectives are also met, whilst exceeding the customer's expectations. Can you give us a couple of examples of ways in which kind of our clients are doing that to enhance their customers' experience?
Yeah, sure. So kind of again, just visualizing what you've just said about before the buy button, right? So these are kind of the three main pillars that we would see, just to kind of reiterate your point around kind of why this is important. But if we kind of put that into a kind of classic real world illustration, the product detail page is an area where we would see untapped opportunity to be able to bring inventory into that order management kind of experience, as we like to call it, to be able to deliver important components into the journey for the consumer. So there are things that maybe you can't do because you don't have the technology to support things like soft reservations from a shopping basket that you see here up in the top right. Being able to reserve for a consumer who's expressing interest in a product so that it then mitigates the risk of overselling for other products and clients that are interested in getting across that is something that we're seeing more and more of. Another kind of example that is I'm seeing in almost every client interaction now is kind of pre-orders and back orders. So leveraging the concept of stock that doesn't physically exist anywhere yet that you want to be able to sell and promise and reserve, and once it becomes physically available, meet that promise and deliver on that. That kind of virtual view of stock is something that you really need to be able to do and track, together with forecasted replenishment of future dated stock that again doesn't physically reside anywhere yet, but will at a point in time. Being able to surface these on your front end, where you've spent a considerable amount of time and effort and money to get that experience to be as glossy as you can make it, it is missing the opportunity if you're not using inventory as a way to enhance that and make that as transparent and valuable for the consumer when they're checking out. Another great example here, it is being able to provide a granular level of delivery services and various collection options and a very transparent view of expectation on time and cost as they move through a checkout process is a guaranteed way to get consumers to buy more, and then the conversion rate is only going to increase if you're offering those upfront.
Thanks, Alan. So we've talked about a few of the different functional capabilities of a modern OMS, but let's face it, inventory and order management is a potentially complex area. If you're a sophisticated business operating multiple brands or across multiple regions, can be quite daunting. And added into that, some of the things we talked about earlier about the rate of change of customer behaviors. It's difficult to predict 12 to 18 months out what the functional requirements of your order management system might need to be. So I'm seeing our clients with desires and successfully implementing in 4 to 6 months rather than taking much longer as OMS has potentially historically been. And whilst there are no simple OMS projects, and it would be unfair to characterize OMS as a simple domain, that there are ways that with careful consideration, you can see a return on capital in a much shorter time than historically was possible. Given the experience that you have, Alan, with our partners and clients implementing order management projects, can you give us a few areas that our listeners can consider in order to de-risk or demystify some of that potential complexity, areas in which they can accelerate project rollout, essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it was very important for us to not leave this stone unturned with respect to the delivery of this, because I think that the way in which you roll this out is critical to the success. So there are many lenses through which you can look at to achieve that. Looking at the domains in which you should, the order in which these domains should be rolled out is a great example of that. So, you can't really run a successful order sourcing process without resolving kind of inventory visibility. That seems like a natural thing to do first, and doing it in this order that you see here from left to right is one where we've seen great success in the past. And then kind of once you've done it in one brand or one region, being able to cookie cutter that out and roll it out across other areas of the business, it is where we see great success. Another example is thinking about the various processes, both delivery option, but also fulfillment process. Trying to do it all at once is quite difficult for businesses just by the sheer volume of business process change that you might go through internally within the company. So picking those that are going to be easier to start with as an MVP and accelerating from there is another kind of lens that you can look through that I think is quite helpful. And then a kind of obvious one as well, given we're talking about a kind of headless model, picking those channels or heads that you want to start with and then being able to roll those out iteratively over phases is another way in which you can roll out effectively without being too volatile and too disruptive to start with. Start with the ones where you'll get the most value for the shortest amount of time and work from there. And that's where we tend to see good value. And I think that kind of brings us to a very critical last point around, well, what does that mean in terms of what I should look for? So if I've got a challenge around order management and I need tools to help me, we see great value in having as much to start with, not a blank canvas, but have ready to go processes that can help you boot up quickly. But then in recognition of being able to reconfigure things slightly for the requirements of your business, then you've got a catalog or a library to dip into to make those changes. And then a development experience that ensures that you've got flexibility to be able to go through an extension framework that allows you to go that bit further should that tool not give you everything that you need from day one, and while maintaining a core structure around software versioning and ensuring that you've kind of got a cloud service that's effectively versionless and you can extend on top of.
And I think that's a critical point, and one to kind of leave folks with before we get into some Q&A, time permitting, is much like headless principles. We in the order management world seek to offer the ultimate in flexibility, but recognize that can't take 12 months to go and deploy. So the point being, let's get up and running quickly, iterate fast, learn more about our customers, learn more about how demand affects our inventory positioning and so forth, and iterate quickly. So no introduction of restrictions just in order to get up and running quickly, but let's not do everything at once. Sabrina, do we have some questions?
We certainly do, Jamie. So talking about inventory, is Fluent Commerce able to process real-time stock movements from several hundred up to more than 1,000 point of sale and stock locations to calculate correct inventory, and what are the limitations?
I'll take that one to start, and then Alan, I'm sure you've got points to make also. It's a really good question, right? Because as the gentleman who's asked the question has identified, seeing stock changes across a large number of locations, be those stores, warehouses, third-party distribution centers, dropship partners, or any other sources of inventory, is incredibly important in order to be able to accurately provide fulfillment expectations before the buy button. So this is one of the key challenges in a project, as Alan said, to unify that inventory and be able to segment it and be able to trust that it's up to date and accurate is incredibly important. So the simple answer to the question about scale is that yes, we have a number of clients with greater scale than hundreds and thousand locations. The rate of change of inventory differs across category, so and differs across retail industry. Fast fashion differs from grocery, differs from home improvement, and so forth. So whilst there's no kind of one answer to, Fluent has a number for the number of locations it can handle. What we have invested significantly in the product is the ability to manage those trickle feeds or delta changes, and we've looked at ways to optimize the updating of inventory. And actually, one of the aspects that absolutely merits a deep dive is the orchestration approach to applying the business logic to the raw inventory numbers in order to be able to make those relevant presentations pre-buy button. So absolutely, Fluent is designed for scale. We work with tier one enterprise retailers. Most of our clients operate in multiple geographies and or multiple brands. Alan, do you have anything that you would like to add around the way in which Fluent handles inventory changes?
Yeah, sure. A hot topic with pretty much everyone we talk to in the market. So, just to kind of back up Jamie's point there, really, that we've got numerous clients today who've got locations in the hundreds who are sending us intraday deltas and stock updates from point of sale and warehouse management and other sources of inventory to ensure that we have the best aggregated view to be able to present online. It's a key proposition of using a Fluent platform, and indeed any OMS should really be thinking about that. And I spoke earlier about some of those ways and mechanisms that you can leverage in order to be able to ensure that the inventory feeds that you're receiving are digested in the most effective manner and therefore can be considered to be as close to near real time as possible.
Thank you both. We are overrunning, but I think we can squeeze one more in. In order to go headless, do I have to start from scratch and throw everything I have away today?
I should certainly hope not. I think it's fair to say that there are systems or suites, and everybody, as I said earlier on, everybody has systems in place that are doing a job. And I think if you were perfectly satisfied with the performance of your existing systems, you ought not to replace anything. But if there are aspects of those systems which are not adequate or are not enabling you to make change, if you're frequently having the conversations internally around, I would like to do this, but it's going to take X amount of time, or we don't know how to change that, or the folks who were managing that are no longer with us. We see lots of those challenges around aspects. Many of our clients will make changes to only components of the architecture on a journey towards headless. Often the starting point is to think about the unification of those data and services at the bottom half of one of those first slides that we showed you. I think building the foundations really enables you to then do all of the incredibly important personalization and customer experience tweaks on the front end. That's not often the exciting way to look at things, but I'm certainly an advocate for shoring up the foundations before you paint the front door for a home improvement analogy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That does conclude us for today and the webinar. Thank you both for presenting and our audience for joining us today. We will be sharing a recording of this session out to you all in the coming days. And of course, if you do have any questions in the meantime, Alan, if you just progress one more slide, feel free to reach out to either Jamie or Alan directly, or you can respond to the email that you'll receive from us. With that, we wish you all a good day and goodbye.